Can you read this? Huh? You cannot read it. But this should be familiar to you. I'm reading it. The debate between Las Casas and Sepulveda in the school of Saramacca in 1550. In the 1550s, Sepulveda argued that indigenous peoples of the Americas had no soul and therefore were not humans and could be enslaved without representing a sin in the eyes of God, while Las Casas argued that they were savages with a soul that is culturally inferior, childlike, but ultimately humans to be Christianized rather than enslaved. Does this ring a bell?
Yes.
This is not my language. This is Ramon Grossvogel speaking. Yeah. So essentially, what I'm saying here is that before the 18th century, we had the Renaissance University, which was based on Christian theology. Yeah, and that was the contest. So it was a question of whether you are a Christian or you are not a Christian. So knowledge was based on theology. This is the point I'm making. I'm now shifting to what Ramon Grossvogel does best, shifting to the secular science. When the secular people took over, secular philosophy took over Christian ethics, Christian theology, and claimed to be producing scientific knowledge. And here we get the beginnings of knowledge production as we have come to understand it now in the social sciences, and which Ramon Grossvogel calls, this is the last time I'm mentioning his name, calls the westernized universities. Yeah, but the point is that, so if we start with Adam Smith, yeah, this is a quote from his Wealth of Nations. Now, which is fundamental to our understanding of economics and political economy today. When he wrote his Wealth of Nations, he said, also in the same Wealth of Nations, and this is what people do not take notice, he wrote this: compared, indeed, with the more extravagant luxury of the great, his accommodation must no doubt appear extremely simple and easy. And yet it may be true, perhaps, that the accommodation of a European prince does not always so much exceed that of an industrious and frugal peasant, as the accommodation of the latter exceeds that of many an African king, the absolute master of the lives and liberties of 10,000 naked savages. Now, this quotation is in the book, is in the Wealth of Nations, but many people read without even noticing that this is there. Yeah, essentially, laying the foundation of economics meant that if you're going to study these countries or these societies, you don't even need to consider them as economic beings, so to speak. Yeah, so the study of economics is something which is European-based at the time of European industrialization. Yeah. And then we go here to Immanuel Kant, some years later, yeah, who, my friend must have told you already, writes, "The Negroes of Africa have received from nature no intelligence that rises above the foolish. The difference between the two races is thus a substantial one. It appears to be just as great in respect to the faculties of the minds as in color." It means black and white in this case. These were the foundations, founding the foundations of what philosophy, what became later known as social sciences. And this is the question is, what is the place of Africa in this methodology and in their way of thinking? I'm saying this not because I want to give a critique on them, yeah, but I'm doing it, but I'm saying this in a sense that this type of knowledge is going to be institutionalized, and I'll tell you why it is significant today, and why if we study knowledge, with this kind of knowledge production, we have to take these things into account. Because these scholars, now to go back to Hegel, who 50 years after Adam Smith also says, Anyone who wishes to study the most terrible manifestation of human nature will find them in Africa. The earliest reports concerning the continent tell us precisely the same, and it has no history in the true sense of the word. We shall therefore leave Africa at this point, and it need not be mentioned again, for it is an unhistorical continent with no movement or development of its own. What we understand as Africa proper is that unhistorical and undeveloped land which had to be mentioned before we cross the threshold of world history. Now, so when you're talking about world history, what they are telling us in the 18th and 19th century, that is the secular sciences. The theologists have made their points, secular scientists are making their point, is that we don't have to be concerned with Africa. That is those who were providing knowledge which they claim to be universal. Now, let's go to our friend, Karl Marx. It is assumed that, all these people are conservative, so now it is the left who is in the chair. So we have to be grateful to the one who is concerned with the plight of the wretched of the earth. And Karl Marx says, the conquest of Algeria is an important and fortunate fact for the progress of civilization. And after all, the modern bourgeoisie, with civilization, industry, order, and at least relative enlightenment following him, is preferable to the feudal marauding robber with the barbarian state of society to which they belong. That is also. Now, when my friend Lewis Gordon, why am I telling you this? My friend Lewis Gordon is a philosopher, and he said when he was in graduate school, he was studying, and then he reads some of these texts, and then when he discusses with his colleagues, fellow students, he says, it seems that these philosophers did not like Africans and black people at all. Then they say, what do you mean? That is the question that comes. Then he says, but don't you read the text? He says, which text? And then he shows them where they make references to Africa. After they've read it, they say, no, that's not what he means. So here he said, but what does he mean? Then they start defending the writer as if that philosopher is God. That he is not a human being, so you cannot criticize. The point I'm making here is that knowledge becomes so naturalized that because it is on a paper, it is assumed that this philosophy said it, and therefore that is it. But it's a human being who said it, and that human being also had some ethics, he had some political context, and all those things. But once these are institutionalized and naturalized, it becomes problematic. We take it for granted. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when an African intellectual, when you confront these statements, which is considered to be foundations of our social sciences or knowledge production, do you ignore them or do you confront them? You have to make a choice. And the point is that, as we all know, if you pursuing knowledge, you also have to review the knowledge of those who went before you. And this becomes very tedious for the African, in the sense that you have to go through this before you come to the point you want to make. So it comes with a lot of knowledge. Either you are discussing with people who are aware of the issues and then you go straight to the point, or otherwise, sooner or later, it will become an obstacle in your way, because you will be told that you do not know or you did not understand what was said or what is here and there. So you cannot produce knowledge from nowhere. You are producing knowledge in relation to what you came to meet and the materials at your disposal. Now, if we come to the division of labor in European sciences, the way it was approached also in Africa is that it was approached in three ways, just like the division of labor. In the case of Africa, then you have those who studied the Orientalists included North Africa, because it was Arabic and Islam, and it is assumed that because it is part of great religion and has written language, it is therefore part of the Oriental world. This is the question of who defines Africa. Yeah, so the Africa is no more being defined as a geographic location, but Africa is going to be defined in terms of either religion or written language, so to speak. But then they had the problem of what to do with Egypt. Yeah, that is, do you include Egypt among the Orientals after the Europeans had considered that their civilization has its roots in Greek civilization? And then if you consider that Greek civilization is tied to Egypt and Mediterranean civilization, then that becomes problematic. So to get around this thing, they coined something they call Egyptology. Yeah. So by studying Egyptology, you prevent yourself from either talking about Arabs or talking about Islam or talking about Africans. Yeah. So a new discipline emerges, yeah, to ensure that you carve Egypt out of Africa and make Egypt part of Mediterranean Greek civilization and a part of the study of so-called antiquity. Yeah. So that became the issue in the Orientalist camp. And then you have those who had to deal with areas where Europeans settled, like South Africa and Southern Africa. So there too, white South Africa is studied by economists, sociologists, and social scientists, and blacks Africans are studied by anthropologists. Yeah, so those societies are not studied also in a holistic fashion. So you have those who study the white South Africans and therefore do not know whether that country is a developed country or underdeveloped country. So when they study the white South Africans, they think that the country is a developed country. When they study Africans, the anthropologists take the lead, yeah, and put them in the other categories. And then also the notion of black South Africa, sub-Saharan Africa emerges. Now, what is important in these categories is that it's not just an issue of studying those areas, but these have been institutionalized. The European Union recognizes 3 Africas, not 1 Africa. Yeah, I'm saying this because when I come to Pan-Africanism, I'll tell a different story. What they recognize, 3 Africas, and therefore European Union has an agreement with Maghreb Africa, that is North Africa, has another agreement of so-called Sub-Saharan Africa in the context of the Lomé Convention, Cotonou Convention, ACP, that is African, Caribbean, Pacific Group of States. Those same groups which are part of the colonized and enslaved people. And then they have another agreement of South Africa, yeah, which they consider as a different entity. Why is South Africa different? They will not say it in public, but it's because they think the whites have a dominant role to play there. I remember in 1975, 95, when I was doing some work in Brussels, the South African delegation came to Brussels to sign the new trade treaty with the European Union in response to the end of apartheid. And the South African delegation thought that they could finish this in 2 weeks because they becoming part of the ACP group, the Lomé Convention group. When they got there, the European community told them that, no, you are not real Africans. Yeah, we have to sign a separate agreement with you because your economy is different, you are developed and all those things. So, so instead of spending 2 weeks, they spend about 5 years trying to get a contract in place because the South Africans wanted to be part of an existing treaty in the context of Lomé Convention, and the European Union wanted them to be in a separate category. So I'm saying this because the knowledge production and the way Europe has studied Africa, internalized, institutionalized Africa, has also its repercussions till today. Yeah, that they recognize three Africas along the lines of civilized and non-civilized. Yeah, so that has been institutionalized, and they are in trade treaties today.